Well, first of all, I want to thank Stand Up For Idaho. I realized that one of the reasons why I had always started doing herbs was because of the freedom it gave me. So I just want to thank the Stand Up For Idaho for encouraging me to do this, because I've been trying to put stuff together for a while. This is a disclaimer. A couple of things that I want to mention, though, is that I'm not a medical practitioner, okay? So I can't give medical advice. I can't cure whatever it is that you want to have cured. But I am an herbalist, and another thing I want to mention is that the one that's bolded, as with conventional medicine, herbal medicines, medicine is vast and complex and must be used responsibly. Individuals react differently to different remedies, okay? So herbs can increase or decrease the effectiveness of a pharmaceutical drug, okay? And sometimes, a lot of times, people ask me, if they're taking some type of medication, how is that going to, is there any contraindications with anything that I would take? And I tell them, if you are at the highest dose that you can take of a medication, and there's a chance that you might bump into a danger zone, then you need to make sure that you're with you have a health practitioner that you're working with, so that you make sure that everything is safe. All right, I'm going to give you a little bit of background. So if you don't know me, my name is Liesl Vosika, and I am a self-taught herbalist of 30 years. I am the owner of Red Clover Herbs and Market, and me and my husband started it about 9 years ago. And we've been going ever since. We sell loose leaf herbs and tea supplies, things like that. I grew up in the highlands of Arizona, up at about 7,000 feet in the mountains on a ranch of about 280 acres. And I grew up farming, ranching, and I was quite the tomboy. And so I was like, nothing was better than rolling in the dirt for me, and fighting cattle and plowing, okay? So but I had a love for being outdoors. And it's been 31 years. Tim and I met, and our first love was backpacking. And so notice we loved backpacking in the outdoors, and some of the things that we loved most about it is the self-reliance and the feeling of being independent, being able to take everything you've got and put it on your back and head out to the outdoors for about 3 or 4 days, and just be like independent and unplugged. I started doing my own garden. Of course, I had done some gardening growing up. This is actually a picture of my first garden. I had problems with slugs. It was in Oregon. I did a lot of learning by doing my own and trying to figure out a new region where I was doing my gardening. Did a little bit of herbs. Hadn't gotten into a whole lot just yet. But at the time, I was pregnant with my oldest. This is my oldest child right there. And I was pregnant, and I got sick. And I didn't know what I could take while I was sick and pregnant. And so I was searching for things and realized that herbs was the answer. My first herb was raspberry leaf, which we'll talk about later. And it just became a journey that I was like, it was so empowering to me. I just was like, I was thrilled. So this is my family, my kids, close to my herb garden. So I started growing herb gardens, and it's interesting the stories that I started picking up on. This herb right here is called chickweed. It's one of my earliest one as well. And I'll tell you, I really found the power behind the herbs when our little neighborhood of 17 children under the age of 7 got pink eye, and all the parents. And everybody was beside themselves. Some of the families went and got eye drops and things like that. And a week later, they weren't any better. And when my family got it, we headed for the chickweed. And at the time, I didn't even know that much about it. I had to actually go, and I found it. I had took it to a nursery. I had them identify it. They asked me if I wanted to eradicate it from my yard. And I said, no, I need this for my pink eye. And so we administered it as a poultice, and I'll explain what that is. And we ended up lining up children. Within one dose, that pink eye was decreased and almost completely gone. A couple of more doses, and we had no sign of it. We got rid of it, but we just lined up kids, and we just did one kid after another. And I was like, wow, this is powerful stuff. This is really, and not only that, but we were able to teach all of those families in our neighborhood what this could do. And everyone, all those kids could identify chickweed after that, okay? Then as I started like exploring more herb by herb, now mind you, I didn't have a mentor. I was working out of books. I didn't have anybody to consult with. When very first time I met an herbalist, I asked them how to pronounce things because I'd seen the books, seen the herbs, I'd used the herbs, I just didn't know how to pronounce them. But I started making my own mixtures and teas and started to realize that I was what they call an intuitive blender. And so I love putting together herbs, and I don't know how to put it, but when herbs put together in the right way, they lock. And I don't know how to describe it, but once I could get it to lock, I got really good effects from them. And one of those things was my first herbal blend, which was Harmony Blend. And many of you know about it, and I actually have it for sample back there if you're interested. It's got red clover, raspberry leaf, nettle, chamomile, wintergreen, and spearmint in it, and we'll go over a couple of those herbs that you could grow yourself. The next step was after blending, I took it to the farmer's market, and many of you may have seen me at the farmer's market. I've recognized some of you from that time. So that was like 9 years ago. I was under the title of Liesl's Herbs. That's my son, Corey, right there. Anyway, and my premise was I wanted to take the tea out to find out what people who didn't care about my feelings thought about it. Because, you create something and your mom says, hey, that's great. And your sister goes, oh, I love it. And your best friend, of course, is not going to say that it's negative either. And so I went out and I said, okay, I'm going to find out. Because, children don't lie. And the public, they might, adults, they'll try to spare your feelings a little bit, but kids, they do not. And we had an 80 or 90% approval taste. We had some really amazing feedback from people that were using it, so I started feeling even more and more confident. That's when I was contacted by an herb store here in town. Well, she was a supplement store, and we ended up starting Red Clover Herbs and Market, and we've been there for 8 years. And then we specialize in the loose leaf teas and all those bulk herbs that many people were asking me where to find, and they couldn't find in town. So hopefully we're filling a niche. We did start doing herb walks. This is a cartoon character of my friend Tremelda, and she is a 4th generation foraging herbalist, and she became a mentor of mine as we went out and we did herb walks, and I learned a lot from her. She's also a Chinese medicine practitioner, and I've had people like her or like Victoria or if you know Dr. Carrie Jonak, there's many practitioners and people that I have actually learned a lot from. And so that's kind of my journey in a nutshell. We're going to go ahead. I'm asking, why do I tell my story? And I want to tell you, I'm not a certified herbalist. And sometimes to me, and I've talked to herbalists before, and many times certifications then equal regulation. And so many of your best herbalists that I actually learned from will not get certified because of that. But an herbalist is merely a person who practices healing by the use of herbs, a person who collects herbs. So if you're collecting herbs and you're using them for healing, you are now an herbalist. Congratulations, you've already passed. Okay? So I want to go back. I want to talk a little bit, because this is important, about herbal history. I'm going to make this real short. So a long time ago, we know that herbs have been used for centuries, okay? And one of the main places was in monasteries in the Middle Ages. And it was really the hospitals of the time. They grew herb gardens, and there are herb gardens that exist. As a matter of fact, this one still exists. That is a very old herb garden. They started to document it in their books, and this is where we get a lot of our knowledge. As a matter of fact, we almost have lost some of that, and we're trying to regain some of that. Their main things were tinctures, salves, teas. There was all kinds of things that they used. But what happened is in the early 1800s, we started learning about germs. We had microscopes, and which is great because we started to see a world that we hadn't seen before. But the problem was they started to think that they wanted to make room for this by clearing out the herbs. And so there was a smear campaign done in the late 1800s for midwives, for herbs, because they needed to make room for their new technology. Now, there is a place for all of it, but they didn't want to leave a place. They were like, this is out with the old, in with the new. And I think, and over in Asia, they did not do that. So actually, they are our foremost experts on that herbs and medication. So they know more because they never got rid of their herbs. They just brought in the allopathic medicine. So let's talk about, I just said a term, allopathic, right? And allopathic is the science-based modern medical system in which medical doctors and other healthcare professionals such as nurses, pharmacists, and therapists treat symptoms and diseases using drugs, radiation, or surgery. Those are their tools, okay? When we go natural, a many centuries old system that uses natural remedies to help the body heal itself. It embraces many therapies, including herbs, massage, acupuncture, exercise, and nutritional counseling. We're taking two different approaches. There is a place for both, but there's a different approach that we're taking when we're going with herbs. Oh, and I'm just letting you know that I will have all of these slides available, so it's okay if you don't have to copy all this stuff down. So I'm going to give you a comparison. So allopathic, it's high tech and it's less advanced. Okay? Herbal to me is low tech and high advanced. They cannot replicate what herbs do. And I'll explain what that is. The allopathic is very expensive. Your herbals are quite inexpensive. Not all herbs are really super inexpensive, but they're a lot less expensive than your synthetic medicines. Another advantage, part of this is that most of your allopathics, you must have permission, right? You get a prescription. You have to go in and you have to ask the doctor and say, can I get a prescription for this? Or they prescribe something. And with herbals, you don't need to have permission. And to me, that's freeing, and just of in itself. So I've kind of explained before how herbals work versus allopathic. So I see it like this. Your house is on fire, and that alarm goes off. And you go to the doctor, and the doctor says, well, I'll turn that alarm off right now for you. So they try to turn that alarm off, but that fire is still going in your system. And in the body is smart enough to know that I still got to tell you something's wrong. So I'm going to find another way to tell you. If you shut off this alarm, I'm going to start that alarm. So when we're talking about herbals and natural, we're actually going after the fire. We may go after the alarm too, but we're really aimed at putting the fire out because that's the source, right? We're not trying to shut up the body. Allopathic medicine can also decrease your immune system. And it's kind of like a muscle. If we don't use it, it gets weak. And so when we use and we increase and emphasize that immune system, it will strengthen our immune system over a period of time. So allopathic is not intelligent. I know that it seems because it's high tech and it's so specialized, but I have seen, so herbs have the ability to be what they call biodirectional. So you could take an herb and what it will assess whether you need more of something or less. So like for instance, the red clover itself is a biodirectional. It is a phytoestrogen. So it'll go into the system and it'll say, do you need more estrogen or do you need less? And whatever it needs, it will make that adjustment. It'll go either direction. To me, that's super intelligent, right? Whereas like a lot of these drugs are like the dumb bully. They just come in, they're gonna do their job, but they don't really care. They don't really care. They're gonna make some damage. You know, they're not there. They're for a one purpose. That comes to, you'll have a drug that usually has limited purposes. There may be multiple things that you can do with it, but you'll notice that when we start going over these herbs, many of them have vast lists. As a matter of fact, I'll mention some of them, but I can't even come close to listing all the things these herbs can do. I'm just highlighting some of the things. And you may find that you use one of the herbs that I'm going to mention for something completely different that I never used it for. That's not uncommon. So to me, going holistic and going with an herbal is healing. Because if you don't have to be on a medication for the rest of your life for the next 20 years or 10 years or a year, right? That's healing. When you finally can say, I'm done, and let's move on to something else. Most of your times with medical, you actually have a medication dependence. And so it's not uncommon for people to have medications that they continually take for year after year after year after year. And their doctor says that they don't see any foreseeable time when they would stop. And that to me means that you're medication dependent. It actually frightens me, the thought that if our high tech goes down and we don't have these things available, how many people that are on medications, what is going to happen when they can't get these medications? They're dependent on them. They might, I don't know what they'll do. It just seems like to be truly independent, you'll need to make sure that you have alternatives to those. Now, I believe that allopathic has its strengths. They're great at trauma and stabilization. I say, and I know that many of you may have heard this before, but if I'm in a car wreck, don't drive me to the herbalist. Okay, drive me to a hospital where I can get aid, okay? There is a time and a place, and use wisdom in this. It's okay that if you have an issue going on, it's okay to go and stabilize the situation. That's okay. Because I'll have people that come in and they'll go, oh, I'm just like, I didn't know what to do, so they started me on this drug and that drug and that drug, and it's like, it's okay. You stabilized your situation, right? It may have been life-threatening. I don't want anybody to be going, well, I'm a diehard herbalist, and I'm going to doggone it, I'm going to take care of this all by myself without any help and actually become worse for it. So I love the intermix of both. I think they both have their place. And I'm not saying that they don't. I just, the herbal side, we have a lot of strength in preventive and health. So if we can help in the terrain, so sometimes when we talk about germ theory, right? We're talking about things coming in and attacking us. Well, we're working on the terrain. So if that stuff starts to hit us, we're good, right? This whole last couple of years, it was hitting immune-compromised people. If your immune system is up and strong, you have the best chance of surviving things because you're good and strong and you're ready for it. So I feel like that there's a dependence with allopathic. So I see it as a kind of a temporary solution. If you can if you stabilize the situation, but long term, your herbal is going to give you independence. And in the end, I believe that it'll give you more freedom. And I have noticed that myself. Now, I wanted to start, because I named the course the Freedom Herb Garden. I wanted to I love history. So back in World War II and World War I, they started victory gardens. And I'll read this. A victory garden, also called a war garden or food gardens for defense, were vegetable, fruit, and herb gardens planted at private residences and public parks in the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and Germany during World War I and World War II. In wartime, governments encouraged people to plant victory gardens not only to supplement their rations, but also to boost morale. So, I'm thinking, let's start freedom herb gardens, right? Like a victory garden. Have an herb garden that you know how to use, that could be a resource for everybody in your neighborhood. Just kind of like the way I use the chickweed in my neighborhood, right? You know how to use it, you have it in your yard, and you're ready to go. So giving you more freedom, less dependence on high tech and highly regulated healthcare and medicines. Control your own health. I mean, this is a big one. To be able to take control of your own health is very empowering. And natural medicines at your fingertips. I loved being able to grow my own herb garden so that I didn't have to go to the doctor, I didn't have to go anywhere. I could actually go out in my backyard and say, I need this today, I need this right now. Then I go back there, I cut it, I prepare it, and I administer it. And that to me is just, I love being able to do that. Quality control. When you grow your own herb garden, you're gonna know its environment. Right? You're going to know the quality. You're going to know that that you have a good, strong plant and you know its source. You know the soil it's in. You know the neighbors that are around it, things like that. Now, freshness always equals potency. Okay? So the fresher your herbs, the more potent they're going to be. It makes sense, right? So when you're able to take it out of your garden and use it right away, that always is going to be your most potent. And I don't know if you knew, but herbs nourish your soil. They are vitamin and mineral gatherers. Have you ever noticed that when a lot has been demolished or the ground's been stirred up, there's what starts to pop up? Whole bunch of weeds, right? Many of those weeds are strong and great herb or vitamin and mineral gatherers. So for instance, and we'll get to this dandelion, right? Dandelion's high in calcium, and you can tell that your yard is lacking calcium because you got dandelions popping up. They're gathering calcium. They gather herbs to them, so that's why they're superpowered, because they're trying to revegetate areas. So when you next look at an herb and a weed that's growing that you're thinking, you might want to think, what is this ground trying to tell me? What is in the soil? As a matter of fact, I'll go over the dandelion a little bit later, but the herbs benefit your other plants. I don't know if you knew, but many of your herbs are herbicides, pesticides. They'll actually keep insects out of your garden, and it'll actually protect your other plants. And so positioning them in good places will help that. Also, I love making my yard useful and beautiful. I love being able to have flowers I can eat. Okay, I think that it's the coolest thing to have just this beautiful garden and go and tell the kids, go ahead, just nibble on anything you want. As a matter of fact, one of my first gardens was the neighbor, because this was in Portland, and a lot of the kids that would come to my backyard had never eaten out of a garden, never in their lives. So I'd invite the kids back there and I'd go, just go ahead and find a carrot and wash it up and eat it. I just had kids coming back there to snack. It was the snack garden of the neighborhood. You're going to be able to identify plants and herbs. As you grow them, you'll recognize them. And then you'll see them elsewhere, okay? And some of these herbs that I'm going to mention are they'll grow. You don't have to encourage them to grow. They will be growing where you don't want them to grow. But you'll identify them and you'll know their use. And if you're out foraging, you will be able to say, that is a comfrey. That So you'll be able to identify them. That's actually important. So let's start on planting. What do you have? So look at what you have already. I want you to go home and look at your yard and look at all of the things that you consider are weeds and see if any of those have value and what it's going to tell you about the soil that you have there and what you feel like that you would like to keep. Maybe you need to relocate them if they're in the wrong place for you, but you'll find that it'll actually tell you a lot. Consider the things like sunlight. And I know that, now I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not a master gardener, and many of you probably have more time in gardening itself. So I'm not going to cover gardening techniques as I am how it relates to herbs. Moisture, like chickweed, for instance, if you're going to do chickweed, you'll need a moist, shaded area, because that's what it needs. And space and acreage, depending on how much space you have. Some herbs spread way out. Okay, some like comfrey plants get huge, burdock gets huge. You know what I mean? You'll want to have enough space. Okay, what do you need? So let's talk about what do you need. I basically, how I kind of look at it is I want everybody's herb garden is going to look differently because everybody has something different going on in their home. Okay? If you have little kids, you may be planting a different garden than if you are an older person. If you have inflammation issues, you might be planting something different than somebody who doesn't. So look at if you have heart problems make a list of the things that you would like to tackle and like to take care of. Do you want first aid things in your garden? Do you want, and most people do, they want something that they know that they can grab and they can apply. They can stop bleeding just within seconds. They want those things, and we'll go over those. And then herbs that you'd like to cook with. Think about the herbs that have multiple uses, right? It's medicinal, it's beautiful, it's aromatic, and I could cook with it. Right? I look at those 4 things, and if it got a 4 rating, man, it's in my garden. Okay? What do you want? Do you want it to be beautiful, or are you not that concerned about it? Do you want it aromatic? And you'll learn about where to put those aromatics. Do you want to attract butterflies? Do you want bees or do you not want bees? Because I had little kids, and so if I attracted too many bees, then I had an issue. But getting just the right amount of bees, but you want the bees for pollinating, and those are great for your yard. Okay. All right. I'm going to go through kind of the types of herbs before we go through the herbs. And I'm not going to spend that much time on it, but my first category is a nutritive herb. A nutritive herb is like food to the body, okay? It's safe. It's gentle. It's high in nutrition. It rarely has side effects. And you can use these herbs any quantity for extended periods of time, okay? And I have some examples: alfalfa, barley, borage, comfrey, nettles, parsley, raspberry leaf, red clover, and slippery elm. Those are all in that category, okay? Now, if you, as you go along, you'll start to get to know these herbs, and you'll start to see the signs of which category they're in. Your next category is a tonic herb. And a tonic herb works slower. It actually works a little bit slower in the system, and it has a cumulative effect. They are nutritious. They rarely have side effects, just like nutritive, and you can do any quantity for extended periods of time as well, except bitters, okay? So nature has, and God had a way of telling us that not to use an herb for long periods of time for large quantities, and those are bitters, okay? So that's nature's way of telling you, use this herb for short periods of time, for certain issues, in smaller amounts, okay? So and that's why many times people disregard the taste. We've bypassed the taste of herbs because most people take capsules, right? And so they never taste it. But actually the power, some of that power is behind the taste of it. It actually activates certain parts of the body that says, here we come. We're going to do more. We're going to do better because we could taste it. So don't just disregard bitters because they're bitter, because they taste nasty. And which is, kind of hard, but Cleansing herbs. Cleansing herbs stimulate cleansing. They deactivate disease fighting or activates disease fighting. They have a strong effect. They are temporary borrower, I call it. They kind of, sometimes they'll borrow from a certain system to do their thing. Things that are having, you probably noticed this in caffeine, right? It kind of borrows. You're kind of like on temporary thing until you kind of like it catches up with you, right? You do small amounts for a short period of time. Echinacea is one of those, elderroot, golden seal, Oregon grapefruit, rosemary, sage, uva ursi, and yarrow. And most of these have to do with natural antibiotic qualities. Then you have your highly potent, okay? Now this is a category that everybody, when you talk to a doctor that goes, oh no, they're really dangerous, they're worried about that category, okay? Because there are herbs that are now most herbalists will say there is no such thing as a poisonous plant, just highly medicinal ones, okay? And there is some truth to that. As a matter of fact, there are highly poisonous plants that we only do as homeopathics because it's highly diluted. We take a completely different approach. So ones like that would be like arnica. Arnica is used externally for bruising and stuff like that, but we don't take it internally unless it's a homeopathic, okay? They have side effects. They almost always have a side effect with an overdose. They use special care and knowledge. So, and you'll notice on the list, so it's like I've got pennyroyal, poke, cayenne, cotton, black and blue cohosh, donquoy, licorice, and arnica. One of those is licorice, which many people use, but we're only using it a small amount in blends. So as a catalyst to keep things moving. It has a purpose in there, but it's not usually in high doses, okay? So those are kind of the categories. So we're gonna go and we're gonna start talking about a couple of herbs, okay? So dandelion, okay. Now, most people are trying to get this out of their yard. I'll give you a little bit of history on this. So back in the Revolutionary days, see, dandelion is not native to the United States and to America. The French brought them over for their lawns. Okay, ironically enough, they wanted lawns. They needed to aerate their lawns, and dandelion aerates lawns, right? They have deep tap roots. You pull them out, they aerate their lawn. Not only that, but the French knew the benefits of dandelion, so they could pull them up, aerate their lawn, and use the herb. The whole dandelion plant can be eaten, all of it. Now, it's a bit bitter when they're a little bit older, like older leaves. So you like to do it, like if you're gonna do it for a salad, you do young leaves. It is a diuretic. So when you take in and actually some people that are doing like medications, the interesting thing about, which is amazing to me, because it's a diuretic, and if you were to take a medication, it will steal the body of potassium. And dandelion is, ta-da, high in potassium, right? So it's actually replacing what it's flushing. It's amazing. It is, so the leaf, and a lot of times people ask me about, because I've got all of these things. It's a perennial. You can eat the entire plant. Its main action is liver and gallbladder protection and healing, okay? It is generally safe, and there's just some people that are allergic to the plant. And look at the list of all the things, and this is just a partial list, okay? But one of the most common questions about dandelion is, do I use the leaf or the root? And the interesting thing is the leaf is mostly for kidney. And if you're wanting liver and gallbladder, we're heading for the root. A little bit more like that, okay? If you don't want as many dandelions, when I told you that that they're kind of calcium seekers, you can make them go dormant instead of and that's another thing I wanted to get to is that spraying your yard. If you're gonna be using your herbs, you don't want to be spraying chemicals on your yard, right? But in order to have, you can get those. Basically what you're doing is giving the dandelion some calcium, which you can get apple cider vinegar with some water, and you can spray them, and it gives them calcium, and they'll go dormant. And that's how you can control them so that they don't take over, and you can say, okay, I don't want you here, I want you here. Okay, and you can pull them and move them. Use them to aerate your lawn, use them for medicinal, and we'll go over, because this is just setting up and picking what you want in your yard, and this one I'm sure you didn't choose. It's there for the taking. Ta-da, you're already an herbalist. If you pick it and eat it, you're an herbalist. Mint. Okay, I'm really starting out basic here. So I'm sure that a lot of you can identify and love mint. Many people know what mint is. There's a they call it a peppermint paradox, okay? It stimulates circulation and yet it soothes the nerves, right? That biodirectional effect, right? It is a very vigorous plant, okay? So you need to have this contained in your garden. Give it a patch and let it go. It will and if you have other mints, it will crossbreed. I mentioned too that peppermint and spearmint, and let me explain. Peppermint is stronger than spearmint. Spearmint is used mostly when we're dealing with pregnancy or children. Okay, it's just, sometimes peppermint is just too strong, like for infants and for children. They're both catalysts. All of your mint family are catalysts. That means that they actually activate and help move other herbs. It's interesting, nature made it so that mint could be added as to make other herbs more palatable. So if you have a bitter or if you have things, but it works best with ones of its own family. So, but it is mostly used for stomach upset. I'm sure that everybody's, I'm surprised, right? Stomach upset makes, a good herbal, good mint tea is actually really great. But look at all the things. I mean, we've just got, it's antibacterial, antifungal. A lot of people use it for headaches and migraines. It is considered a superfood. It was historically, it helps to keep bugs away. And historically, they used to grow mint around their doorways. So they keep bugs and smells and good smells in their house. And I always like putting my mint in I've put mint in potted plant pots, so it contains it, and close to my door. Next one is chamomile. And a lot of people know and have tasted chamomile tea. It's kind of like, it had the name commonly of ground apple because it kind of has that spicy apple flavor. There are two types. There's the German and the Roman. And so just like the German is an annual, and it's a little bit stronger medicinally, and then the Roman is a perennial, and it's a little bit less bitter. So you kind of choose whether you want to grow it every year or you would like to have it as a perennial. We use the flowers. It has a soothing effect on the mind and body. It is a catalyst as well, so it actually helps to move other herbs as well. It's been known for digestive issues, mostly for anxiety, sleep. Many times we've got a lot of people that use it for sleep, but it is not a sleep aid, it's a sleep regulator. So it'll go in, that's one of those bidirectional, say, are you tired, do you need sleep, and it'll help you go to sleep. But if you drink it in the morning, if you don't need sleep, it won't just put you to sleep, okay? It is generally safe, and ever so often somebody does have allergic reaction to it. So this is in my Harmony blend. I have chamomile, and if anybody's allergic to anything, it's usually chamomile. So it is kind of like, so it helps to know if you would be allergic to this. Parsley. Okay, parsley is a biennial, so it comes up it'll go for 2 years. We use its leaves and the roots, and parsley, of course, you probably use it for your food and for your recipes. It's actually really good for stomach upset. You wonder why they always put that little parsley on your plate afterwards, after you eat in these fancy places, the restaurant. It's so that you can have something as a stomach aid. Okay, it helps with lung congestion, bladder and kidney infection, and clearing kidney stones. It is actually native to the Mediterranean region. We don't overconsume it during pregnancy or lactation. I do have parsley. Parsley root's actually really good for the bladder and kidney, and I actually have it in a formula for that at the shop. Okay, red raspberry. My first herb, okay? This is the ladies' herb, okay? Now it can do more than just things for the ladies, okay? Because I use it for bronchitis, pneumonia, colds, and flus. I've used it for stomach problems. I've used it for all kinds of things. But one of the things that it masters at are things for as far as women. It helps to regulate the women's cycles. It helps with morning sickness. It helps during pregnancy. It helps during labor and delivery. It helps at lactation. It helps with menopause. It is an amazing herb. And it's used in moderation until the last 6 weeks during pregnancy, but it's not, it's just amazing. I've used it, I've had people use it for, especially for like stomach problems and things like ulcers and things like that. So, and then you can have the berries. Come on, you can eat berries. You can have the raspberry leaves. And actually how I first discovered this is my mother-in-law. She actually brought me, I'd been doing some studying and she was living in Washington at the time, and she brought me this big bag of raspberry leaves. She'd heard that I was getting into herbs, and she was like, here, and I was like, oh, I was like, thank you, this is just wonderful. So, all right. Comfrey, all you need is a sliver of a root. Okay, so I had a friend, he was a landscaper, and he was like, why do I have this plant? He kept tilling up and trying to get, aerate his lawn or whatever. He was kind of stirring things. He had a mulching thing that was like replanting it. He kept replanting this comfrey, he didn't know what it was, in his yard. And he was like, what is going on? And I said, you have really great comfrey in your yard. And he goes, and I says, that only takes a sliver. and he goes, oh, well, you think I need to get rid of this? And I said, but you know what? It's a fantastic herb. This is my herb when it comes to, it accelerates healing, okay? If you make a comfrey salve, it will actually go in 2 or 3 inches into the skin. It will heal bone, tissue, ligaments, skin. It is amazing. I carry a comfrey salve. I encourage people to drink it because I have seen people just heal from wounds and cut. There's a customer that I have as an MMA fighter. And so I started him on comfrey salve and drinking some comfrey tea. I did it in conjunction with my Harmony because it's strong in anti-inflammatories. Then he cut about 18 months off of his recovery time. It's really good. Echinacea. Echinacea, also known as purple coneflower. It's a perennial. It's easy to plant and grow. You use the root. You can use the flower. Its greatest action is in its immune system stimulant. I've used echinacea a lot for colds, flus, any kind of infection that's starting to happen. Now, what I found out later is it also is a biodirectional. So basically, and this is the way I told my kids, echinacea activates your white armies. They're going to fight off whatever it is you've got, right? But it's also biodirectional. So if you have too much white blood cell count, it'll actually regulate and bring that down. Okay, so it's a biodirectional. It's usually a 2-week on, 2-week off thing, but and it's gentle enough to use for young children. And so I did it as an extract for my young kids. It'll help to break a fever. It helps with the immune system. And so when the first signs of colds and flus, we started doing echinacea, and then it helps them fight off whatever it is and helps their white armies. Mullen. Now, this mullen, I'm sure you've seen grow everywhere. You'll see it on the side of the road, things like that, okay? And mullen actually, honestly, the last 2 years has been one of my best sellers because of colds and upper respiratory infections, okay? And that's what it does. It's really good for upper respiratory. It's a cough suppressant. It's bronchitis, asthma, skin wounds, snake bites. Again, we're looking at all kinds of stuff. It's very commonly used for ear infections in an oil. And then you pull the herb out after 6 weeks and you've got an infused oil. And some people, when they do the tea, it's, you know, they're a little bit sensitive to the hair, so you just strain out the tea, strain it. The leaf is mostly for the lungs. That's the part that you usually use for the lungs. But also, you know, I look at the mullen and it makes a very pretty plant, you know, honestly, and it would look really nice in the garden. And it's fairly big. Okay. Lavender. Okay, who couldn't resist having this in their herb garden? It's beautiful. It's very aromatic. And we use the leaves and flowers. It's anti-anxiety. It's for aches and pains. It kills lice and nits. It's insect repellent. It's good for respiratory, UTI, lowering the blood pressure, nervous system, exhaustion, and headaches. It's just like, it's an amazing herb. As a matter of fact, its Latin root is actually from the word levar, means to wash. And so many times throughout history, they've used it to wash. And, you know, it's a nice herb to have at the bath, and so it just makes a beautiful plant. And I know that a lot of people grow it just because it looks beautiful, but it has a lot of uses as well. Okay. Plantain. This is an interesting herb. This one actually, it's interesting because this was called white men's footprints. And one of the reasons is that because this is not native to the United States, but it came over with white man. But every time that soil is interrupted, so the Native Americans called it this because white people had come in and they cleared land and they started making improvements, and plantain popped up. Okay, it's what it's trying to do. It's trying to reinvigorate the soil. Okay, plantain is amazing for cleaning wounds, treating wounds. It's an anti-venom. So one of the most popular ways to use plantain is use a leaf. If you find one of these, if you get a bee sting, an insect bite, you can take a leaf and you take it and you just put it in your mouth and chew it a little bit and kind of get it all in, and you'll get that pain killing starting through your system. And then you basically take that and you put it straight on the bite. It's actually, and a lot of times it grows close to like nettles, close to things that it's used as helpful for. So it precipitates protein from the membrane, which is what bee venom is. So it's actually changing, it's breaking up the protein in a sting is how it works. It reduces swelling and pain. So we use it a lot for infectious bites, but also for blood poisoning, because it's actually drawing infection and it's actually pulling and actually helping that poisoning not to move any farther. It tastes pretty good. And actually, the Native Americans used to use the thicker leaves. They used to actually use it to sew up wounds. Plantain isn't usually heated. It actually kind of the important elements get destroyed in it. So we don't usually make a plantain tea. We just use it. We use it raw. And this is another one. If I was to put this in my yard, usually there's a couple of them I would just leave in my grass, and this would be one of them. Yarrow. Okay, yarrow. I love the Latin name for yarrow. And it's basically based upon Achilles, the Achilles heel, like the Greek legend. So Achilles healed, the legend has that Achilles healed his soldiers by packing their wounds with yarrow. So this is like Achilles, 1,000 leaves of Achilles. That's what that means. Okay. Yarrow is amazing for bleeding, for stopping bleeding. It's interesting because topically, it's one of those amazing smart herbs. Topically, it can slow blood flow, and internally, it helps to blood flow and breaks up clots. It's one of its most amazing abilities. So it actually can stop internal and external bleeding. It's antibacterial, it's antifungal. It's really great for wounds. It's good for anxiety and relaxation. It's also used for dental pain. It can break up a fever. It's good for yeast infections, a blood purifier. It just goes on and on. Yarrow is amazing. Don't get this confused with tansy. If you ever see, there's another plant that looks kind of like this at the top around here, and it grows prolifically, and it's yellow, and they stand about this high and stuff like that. Make sure you identify it if you start to do any foraging, because tansy is in that category of highly toxic. Red clover. Red clover is one of my favorite herbs as well. Well, I named my store after it, right? It is a gentle blood cleanser. And not only that, but I chose it in my tea and stuff like that because it had a couple of things that I loved. It's highly nutritious. It cleanses. It's bringing in nutrition while it's cleaning. It's good for the respiratory system. It's a fantastic anti-inflammatory, and it's gotten quite a reputation as an anti-cancer herb. So it's actually clearing and cleaning things out, and it is used in moderation during pregnancy. And this is another one you can just have growing in your yard, in your lawn, and just mow it with your lawn. Okay. Red clover is a phytoestrogen. When I talked about like an estrogen, like that could regulate estrogen, this is one of them. It'll actually go in and say, do you need more estrogen or less? Especially for women, it's really important that we keep that balanced, and so it does that. It also uses for skin conditions too. So one of my main ingredients in the Harmony blend is red clover. So red clover and raspberry leaf and nettle, in which we'll go over. And I recommend you use it topically too. So you can drink it as a tea, but if you have bruising, if you have any kind of skin condition, you can just take the tea out of your fridge and put it on a paper towel and slap it on there. And I've also had people use it for allergies, and they'll take it out and they'll put it on a paper towel if they have watery and itchy eyes, which we'll get to because part of that's the nettle, and you can put it on the eyes and it'll bring that inflammation down. So, drink it, bathe in it. All right, garlic. Okay, everybody knows, come on, garlic is like very strong, great immune stimulant, antiviral, antifungal. One of the things that you want to do though with garlic is make sure it's not that, because it's a bulb, it'll actually pull a lot to it. And so you want to make sure it gets enough space so it doesn't like deplete your other plants. Because it really does pull a lot of vitamins and it's aggressive in that effect, which is great. But you also don't want to put this close to other things that it might taint. Like, you may not want to put it right next to your mint, because you might have garlic mint. You'll have tea. You'll be tasting your mint tea. You go, gosh, this tastes a lot like garlic. It is, and so, it's great for, it's antiviral, antibacterial, all of those things. It's good for warts, parasites, it's immune system booster. It's really good. Vampires, there you go. If you have a problem with that in your yard, Yes. Now, garlic does lose some of its healing properties when it's cooked. It'll be the most healing if it's raw. Okay, so once you cook it, you're going to lose some of that. But if you're really wanting that strong, and so a lot of times we'll take a garlic, like garlic cloves, and just set it in oil and let it do a garlic oil and use it that way. That's a great way to use garlic. Okay. Burdock. Okay, this is a biennial. It grows all over the place. It is actually its first year. It looks like this top one, and then the second year it comes off with all these burrs. So you'll know that it's the year 1, year 2. Okay, burdock actually stimulates both the liver and kidney, and it eliminates toxins from the body. So a lot of times we use it for allergies. We use it as antibacterial, and antifungal, for skin conditions, for inflammation. The one poison lookalike, it looks a lot like rhubarb. Okay, that first year it looks like rhubarb. So make sure that you've got the right plant if you forage. If you've planted it, then you'll know. You'll know that you've got, and then when it comes out with that second year and those burrs, you'll know that you've got burdock. Okay. All right. And this is actually, it's used a lot for allergies. Stinging nettle, talk about allergies, okay? Stinging nettle is one of my favorite herbs. It is high in chlorophyll, high in almost every nutrient that you need for human development. I mean, seriously. The stings itself are actually it's like putting vitamin C. When you get stung by stinging nettle, it's like injecting vitamin C into your skin. As a matter of fact, Romans it's called Roman urtication. And they used to take the nettle, and when they had inflamed or swollen joints, they would take and tap, and what it'll do, it'll actually make it swell just quickly, and then it'll go down, and the pain will be gone. So it's used a lot as an anti-inflammatory, and that uric acid is part of like the healing process. Oh, urtic, I'm sorry. It's really great for arthritis because it's anti-inflammatory, and it's high in chlorophyll. And chlorophyll we really need for human development and for blood purifying and things like that as an anti-inflammatory. Stinging nettle does sting, but like I said, it's kind of like a vitamin C. Handle carefully when you're harvesting it. It does, it can get irritating. Yeah, more stinging nettle cures stinging nettle. All right. Stevia. Okay, now I love having stevia on hand. Stevia is 30 times sweeter than sugar. Okay, but what it is that it's going to be an annual here in Idaho. It is normally a perennial, but our climate doesn't really grow it as a perennial. If you remove the flowers early, that'll improve the leaf flavor, which is that sweetness. It's highly nutritious. It helps, one of the things that's nice, it helps to regulate blood sugar levels. It's actually really good for people that are diabetic. And so if you're looking for something sweet and you're diabetic, it's a really great way to get a little bit of that sweetness. It helps to lower blood pressure. It inhibits the growth and reproduction of a bacteria that causes tooth decay. And so a lot of times you'll see it in tooth powders. I have it in my tooth powder because of that. And it aids in weight loss and it does no calories. It helps with upset stomach, things like that, and it strengthens the immune system. So it's actually really good. These are really hard to germinate from seed, though. I usually try to get a starter plant for stevia. Option to consider, okay? I'm going to talk about just your herb garden. Think about formal or informal, and we'll go over that. Do you want them in rows or blocks? I did my herbs in blocks because I can fit more in a small space. And I also did some research, and I actually find that I have to do less weeding when I do it in blocks. So basically what I'm doing is I'm scattering, I just make a patch of it, and then I thin it to where I need it, and then let it grow, and give it that space, rather than doing it in rows. I like raised beds. I like being able to control my soil. I like knowing what's in my soil. I can control more bugs, and then also, because I had little kids, they tend to walk all over and trample your ground down, and this helps so that they don't trample over your ground. I also like raised beds because it was better on my back. You know what I mean? Because if you can raise up my best herb, like my best raised beds were like they were 20 feet long and 4 feet wide. And you want them not too far that you can't reach from both sides. Just remember that. If you make them too deep. Another idea that I love is that you can, when you're making your raised beds, because it takes so much in soil and stuff like that, you start putting put leaves and branches and fill the bottom layer with that, and it'll be composting over a period of time. And you're basically making a deep compost. Now, we don't have problems with slugs, but I fought a lot of slugs and found that they say copper can help. And then I fed my slugs lots of beer. Yeah, here I was, a pregnant mother going to the store buying the cheapest beer I could find, and they're like looking at me, and I'm like, it's for the slugs, seriously. I even had our neighbors, they were a young couple, and they were thought it was hilarious. So every time I'd see my backyard, they go, "Oh, do you want a beer?" "Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll give it to my slugs." Oh, and I was going to mention perennials and annuals. Perennials and annuals, sometimes you can like mix and match them, but if you're going to go perennials, I usually kind of like said, this is my perennials, right? And these are going to just keep growing. And then these are my annuals, so I'm going to dig this up every year, and then I'm going to replant it. So you might want to think about that. Companion and enemy plants, things that are work together, like I said about the garlic and the mint. You know what I mean? If it has a really strong, if it's going to pull too much in the soil, you want to separate them. And so in some of those herbs, they kind of like will taint your herbs. Aesthetics, let's think about, and I'm sure that many of you have like done gardens where you're talking about where your blooms are, your greeneries. Think about where your door, like if you want those aromatics to be, you can smell them in your house. Do you want them, so whether they smell good or bad? I mean, what if if that herb doesn't smell that good, you may not want it to like be close to your doorway. The height and growth habits. So you make sure they have enough room to grow, that you, like, I wouldn't put nettle in front of something that I was trying to reach. On a day, or that second year burdock. I would want it in the back a little bit more because of the burrs, thorns, stings, okay? And then use them wisely. Put them where they can actually fight off bugs and things like that for your garden. Those are just things to consider. Okay, I'm going to just kind of show you a couple of gardens, and then we're going to go through these. Now, I have a book that I loved. That kind of gave some ideas. I think, and I'll put these on my website. So what I would recommend, if you want one of these ideas, you can use it and then basically swap out whatever herbs you want, right? And say, well, I don't want to do the hyssop. I don't want to do the sage, but I want to do the lavender, and it'll kind of give you some ideas. So these are just a couple of ideas. This is a more formal garden. This is another type of formal garden again. This was focused mostly on culinary. And so you can have one part of your garden that says, I just want most of my culinaries kind of collected like a kitchen garden. And then they'll do medicinal. You'll have those medicinal effects too, but then you'll kind of go, okay, these are all collected here. This one's a potpourri garden. They kind of introduce it. And then so most of these are very aromatic, And then this is one of the ideas just to put it close to your door. What would you put in the window? What are you going to put outside the door and make it like smell really nice? And you've got the lavender and the catnip. And by the way, catnip is like a cousin of the mint. And beware, because cats really do love it. And I never was brave enough to plant catnip because I just knew I would attract every cat in the whole neighborhood. And they'd be rolling around in my yard all the time, all kind of punch drunk. I just like, no. So sometimes I would recommend, if you have problems with that, bring that catnip inside. Okay. And this is just a simple garden, right? You could do something as simple as just put like four herbs down, 4 or 5 herbs down, and then just let it grow. But I would disagree. That spearmint is way too close to that garlic. And this is a fragrance garden. I love the configuration of this. And so this is where I kind of like, I'll show you, this is what they have, but then I said, this is my freedom garden. So these are a lot of the herbs that I have just spoke about, and that's where I would put them if I had that configuration. So I would, so I'd have my raspberry there. I'd put my hops there. I'd put my burdock there. Okay, and you can use this. I'll like I said, I'll put this online. And if you want to have some place to start, or you like this idea, switch and swap things out, and just kind of come up with some ideas. So here's some suppliers. So now Town and Country Gardens, they do have some herbs. I called them. They have probably about 5 different types of seeds of the herbs. Not very many. I think they had echinacea. They have, they didn't have as many that I would have liked, but they should have their starter plants coming out this week, they told me. So you can check them out. Sunnyside Gardens has some. They have it both in seed and some starters, and Eagle Rock Nursery. So check all of those. But I did find these are online suppliers. Eden Brothers is rare and hard to find seeds. They look good and reputable. I haven't used any of these yet, so I'm kind of like letting you see at least the sources that I thought, and I did some little bit of research and see if they were going to be good. Because I'm looking for seeds that are, I love heirloom seeds. I love non-GMO, not messed with seeds. This Johnny Selected Seeds, they have a lot, but they are a very large company. So this is us. Then I would love for you to take pictures of your gardens and post it on our Facebook page and tell how your experience was. We'd love to hear that. And like I said, we're going to try to start getting more seeds, because I know that there have been people coming to the shop all the time saying, I want to know where to find seeds and starter plants. I want to welcome you to have a little bit of sample of my Harmony Blend herbal tea. I created it for upper respiratory infections and colds and flus. There's anti-inflammatories in it and blood purifiers, so we have people using it for arthritis and allergies and immune boosting and digestive disorders and anxiety and depression, all kinds of stuff. Thank you so much for coming.